The sky above New York City burned a sickly orange, thick plumes of smoke curling into the heavens like the tendrils of some monstrous beast. The once proud skyline was now a jagged silhouette of broken glass and twisted steel, a testament to the relentless onslaught of the Zelthari. Their ships, sleek and alien, hovered like vultures over the ruins, their weapons humming with a malevolent energy that sent shivers down Captain Marcus Kane's spine. He adjusted the grip on his rifle, the weight of it familiar and comforting, even as the world around him crumbled. "Move it, people!" Kane barked, his voice cutting through the cacophony of distant explosions and the wail of sirens. His team, Task Force Omega, moved with practiced precision, their boots crunching over shattered glass and debris. There were 6 of them, each a specialist in their own right, but tonight they were united by a single purpose: survival. And, if they were lucky, victory. Sergeant Liam "Ghost" O'Connor, the team's sniper, moved like a shadow, his lean frame blending seamlessly into the chaos. His icy blue eyes scanned the rooftops, ever watchful for the glint of alien optics. Beside him, Corporal Aisha Valkyrie Malik, the team's demolitions expert, carried a pack laden with enough explosives to level a city block. Her dark hair was tied back in a tight braid, her expression grim but determined. Rounding out the squad were Privates Javier "Rook" Morales, the tech specialist, Elena "Doc" Reyes, the medic, and twins Danny and Sam "Riot" Carter, the close-quarters combat experts. They were a mismatched bunch, but they were family. The mission was simple, or it had been, at least. Evacuate Dr. Elena Reyes, a brilliant scientist who had been working on a top-secret project to counter the Zelthari threat, and get her to safety. But simple plans had a way of going sideways, and this one had gone off the rails the moment the aliens had breached the city's defenses. Now, Task Force Omega was stranded, their transport shot down by a swarm of alien drones, and their only option was to navigate the war-torn streets on foot. "Kane, we've got movement," Ghost murmured, his voice barely audible over the din. He pointed to a nearby alley, where shadows shifted unnaturally. Kane nodded, signaling the team to take cover. They pressed themselves against the remnants of a shattered storefront, their breaths coming in shallow gasps. The Zelthari patrol emerged from the gloom, their forms grotesque and otherworldly, towering over 7 feet tall. Their exoskeletons gleamed like polished obsidian, their movements unnervingly fluid. Each carried a weapon that seemed to pulse with a faint, sickly light, and their faceless helmets scanned the area with an eerie precision. Kane's heart pounded in his chest as he weighed their options. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they couldn't afford to be discovered. Not now. Not when they were so close. He glanced at Dr. Reyes, who crouched beside him, her face pale but resolute. She clutched a data drive to her chest, the contents of which could very well be humanity's last hope. "On my mark," Kane whispered, his voice barely a breath. The team tensed, their fingers tightening on their triggers. He counted down silently, his eyes locked on the lead alien. 3, 2, 1, go! The team erupted from their cover, their weapons barking in unison. The Zelthari reacted with terrifying speed, their weapons humming to life as they returned fire. Ghost's sniper rifle cracked, and one of the aliens crumpled, its helmet shattered. Valkyrie lobbed a grenade, the explosion sending shards of debris raining down. Rook darted forward, his hacking device whirring as he attempted to disable one of the aliens' weapons. The twins moved in tandem, their movements a blur as they closed the distance with their combat knives. But the aliens were relentless. One of them lunged at Doc, its clawed hand slicing through the air. Kane shouted a warning, but it was too late. The blow caught her across the shoulder, sending her sprawling. Blood seeped through her uniform, but she gritted her teeth and scrambled to her feet, her medical kit clutched tightly. "Fall back," Kane ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos. The team retreated, their movements frantic but coordinated. They ducked into a nearby subway entrance, the darkness swallowing them whole. The aliens didn't follow, their eerie silence more unnerving than any battle cry. Kane leaned against the damp concrete wall, his chest heaving. He glanced at his team, taking stock of their injuries. Doc was already tending to her wound, her hands steady despite the pain. Ghost was reloading his rifle, his expression grim. The twins were arguing in hushed tones, their usual banter tinged with tension. Valkyrie sat cross-legged on the ground, her explosives spread out before her as she worked to recalibrate a detonator. Rook was hunched over his device, his fingers flying over the keys. And then there was Dr. Reyes. She sat apart from the others, her eyes distant as she stared at the data drive in her hands. Kane approached her, his footsteps echoing softly in the tunnel. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low. She looked up at him, her eyes haunted. "I never thought it would come to this," she admitted. I thought we'd have more time." Kane crouched beside her, his gaze steady. "We're not done yet," he said. "Not as long as we've got breath in our bodies and a fight left in us." She nodded, though her expression remained troubled. "There's something you need to know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The Zelthari, they're not just here to conquer us. They're here to harvest us. Our planet, our resources, our very DNA. They've done this to countless worlds before, and they'll do it to countless more unless we stop them." Kane's jaw tightened. "Then we'll stop them," he said. "Whatever it takes." The sound of distant footsteps echoed through the tunnel, pulling them both from their thoughts. Kane straightened, his hand tightening on his rifle. "We need to move," he said, his voice firm. "Now." The team gathered their gear, their movements quick and efficient. Kane led the way, his mind racing as they navigated the labyrinthine tunnels. The weight of their mission pressed heavily on his shoulders, but he refused to let it crush him. They were Task Force Omega, Earth's last stand. And they would not fall. As they emerged into the night, the city's ruins stretched out before them like a graveyard. Somewhere in the distance, a lone figure moved, their silhouette stark against the fiery sky. Kane raised a hand, signaling the team to halt. He squinted, trying to make out the figure's features, but they were too far away. "Friend or foe?" Ghost murmured, his rifle at the ready. Kane didn't answer. He didn't need to. The figure turned, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light, and raised a weapon. The shot rang out, and the team scattered, their hearts pounding as the battle began anew. The night was far from over. The subway tunnels were a labyrinth of shadows and echoes, the air thick with the scent of damp concrete and rust. Task Force Omega moved in silence, their footsteps muffled by the layers of grime that coated the floor. Captain Marcus Kane led the way, his rifle held at the ready, his eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. Behind him, the rest of the team followed, their faces set in grim determination. Dr. Elena Reyes walked in the middle of the group, her arms wrapped tightly around the data drive she carried. It was a small, unassuming device, but its contents were worth more than their lives. Kane's mind raced as they navigated the tunnels. Dr. Reyes' revelation about the Zelthari's true intentions weighed heavily on him. They weren't just invaders. They were harvesters, stripping worlds of everything that made them unique. Earth was just another resource to them, another cog in their relentless machine. But Kane refused to let that happen. Not on his watch. The sound of dripping water echoed through the tunnel, a steady rhythm that seemed to mock their progress. Kane raised a hand, signaling the team to halt. He crouched low, his eyes narrowing as he peered into the darkness. Something was off. He could feel it in his gut, a primal instinct honed by years of combat. "What is it?" Ghost whispered, his voice barely audible. Kane shook his head. "I don't know. Stay sharp." They moved forward cautiously, their senses on high alert. The tunnel widened into a larger chamber, its walls lined with crumbling tiles and faded advertisements. In the center of the room stood a makeshift barricade, constructed from overturned subway cars and chunks of concrete. It was a human construction, a desperate attempt to hold back the tide of alien invaders. "Looks like someone put up a fight," Valkyrie muttered, her eyes scanning the barricade for any signs of life. Kane approached the barricade, his rifle trained on the shadows beyond. "Hello?" he called out, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Is anyone there?" For a moment, there was only silence. Then, a faint shuffling sound reached their ears, followed by a weak cough. A figure emerged from the shadows, a man in tattered military fatigues. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow, but he held a rifle in his hands with a grip that spoke of determination. Who are you?" the man croaked, his voice rough with exhaustion. "Captain Marcus Kane, Task Force Omega," Kane replied, lowering his rifle slightly. "We're here to help." The man's eyes widened, and he stumbled forward, his legs shaking with the effort. "Thank God," he breathed. "I thought we were the only ones left." Kane caught the man as he collapsed, easing him to the ground. "Easy, soldier. What's your name?" Private Daniels." The man gasped. "We were part of the 42nd Infantry. We tried to hold the line, but they just kept coming." Kane glanced at Doc, who was already moving to examine the man's injuries. "How many of you are left?" he asked. Daniels shook his head. "Just me. The others, they didn't make it." Kane's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "You're not alone anymore. We're getting out of here." As Doc tended to Daniels, Kane turned to the rest of the team. "We need to keep moving. The longer we stay in one place, the more likely we are to be found." "What about him?" Rook asked, gesturing to Daniels. "He comes with us," Kane said firmly. "We're not leaving anyone behind." The team gathered their gear and prepared to move out, but before they could take more than a few steps, a low, guttural growl echoed through the chamber. Kane spun around, his rifle raised, just as a Zelthari patrol emerged from the shadows. Their exoskeletons gleamed in the dim light, their weapons humming with a malevolent energy. "Contact!" Kane shouted, his voice cutting through the tension, its movements unnervingly fluid. "They're not going down," Rook shouted, his voice tinged with panic. "Aim for the joints," Dr. Reyes called out, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Their exoskeletons are weakest there." Kane adjusted his aim, firing at the alien's knees. It stumbled, its movements faltering, and Kane seized the opportunity. He lunged forward, driving the butt of his rifle into the alien's helmet. The creature crumpled to the ground, its body twitching. The battle was over as quickly as it had begun, the street falling silent once more. Kane took a deep breath, his chest heaving as he surveyed the scene. The team was battered but alive, their determination unshaken. "We need to keep moving," Kane said, his voice firm. "They'll send more patrols." The team gathered their gear and prepared to move out, but before they could take more than a few steps, Daniels spoke up. "Wait," he said, his voice weak but insistent. "There's something you need to know." Kane turned to him, his brow furrowed. "What is it?" Daniels hesitated, his eyes darting to the shadows. "The Zelthari, they've set up a command center in the old financial district. It's where they're coordinating their operations. If you can take it out." Kane's heart pounded in his chest as he surveyed the scene, his grip tightening on his rifle. "This is it," he said, his voice low. "We hit them hard and fast. No hesitation." The team nodded, their faces set in grim determination. They moved forward, their footsteps silent against the cracked pavement. The command center loomed ahead, its walls pulsating with an eerie light. Kane's mind raced as they approached, the weight of their mission pressing heavily on his shoulders. But before they could take more than a few steps, a low, guttural growl echoed through the air. Kane spun around, his rifle raised, just as a Zelthari patrol emerged from the shadows. Their exoskeletons gleamed in the dim light, their weapons humming with a malevolent energy. "Contact!" Kane shouted, his voice cutting through the tension. The team sprang into action, their movements swift and precise. Ghost sniper rifle cracked, and one of the aliens crumpled to the ground. Valkyrie lobbed a grenade, the explosion sending shards of debris flying. The twins moved in tandem, their combat knives flashing as they closed the distance with the aliens. But the Zelthari were relentless. One of them lunged at Kane, its clawed hand slicing through the air. Kane dodged to the side, his rifle barking as he fired a burst of rounds into the alien's chest. It staggered but didn't fall, its movements unnervingly fluid. "They're not going down," Rook shouted, his voice tinged with panic. "Aim for the joints," Dr. Reyes called out, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Their exoskeletons are weakest there." Kane adjusted his aim, firing at the alien's knees. It stumbled, its movements faltering, and Kane seized the opportunity. He lunged forward, driving the butt of his rifle into the alien's helmet. The creature crumpled to the ground, its body twitching. The battle was over as quickly as it had begun, the street falling silent once more. Kane took a deep breath, his chest heaving as he surveyed the scene. The team was battered but alive, their determination unshaken. "We need to keep moving," Kane said, his voice firm. "They'll send more patrols." The team gathered their gear and prepared to move out, but before they could take more than a few steps, Daniels. The Zelthari command center loomed before them, a monolithic structure of alien design that pulsed with an eerie, bioluminescent glow. Its walls seemed to breathe, shifting subtly as if alive, and the air around it crackled with an unnatural energy. Captain Marcus Kane crouched behind the remnants of a shattered concrete barrier, his rifle resting against his shoulder as he surveyed the scene. The team was spread out around him, their faces tense but resolute. This was it, the final push. If they could take out the command center, they might just turn the tide of the war. But the odds were stacked against them, and every second they delayed increased the risk of being discovered. "All right, listen up," Kane whispered, his voice low but carrying the weight of authority. "We hit them hard and fast. No hesitation. Valkyrie, you're on explosives. Get us inside. Ghost, cover her. Rook, you're with me. Doc, stay back with Daniels. Twins, watch our flanks. Any questions?" The team shook their heads, their eyes locked on Kane. There were no questions, no doubts. They knew what was at stake. "Good. Let's move." The team advanced in silence, their movements swift and precise. Valkyrie led the way, her pack of explosives slung over her shoulder. Ghost followed close behind, his sniper rifle scanning the area for any signs of movement. The twins moved in tandem, their combat knives gleaming in the dim light. Rook stayed close to Kane, his hacking device at the ready. Doc and Daniels brought up the rear, their faces pale but determined. As they approached the command center, the air grew heavier, the hum of alien machinery vibrating through the ground. Valkyrie crouched beside the structure's base, her fingers moving deftly as she set the charges. Ghost took up a position on a nearby ledge, his rifle trained on the surrounding area. The twins fanned out, their eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of the enemy. "Charges set," Valkyrie whispered, her voice barely audible. "On your mark." Kane nodded, his grip tightening on his rifle. "Do it." Valkyrie pressed the detonator, and the charges erupted in a deafening explosion. The command center's wall buckled, a gaping hole torn into its side. Smoke and debris filled the air, but the team didn't hesitate. They surged forward, their weapons at the ready. Inside, the command center was a labyrinth of alien technology, its walls lined with pulsating veins of light. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and something else, something metallic and sharp. Kane's heart pounded in his chest as he led the team deeper into the structure, his eyes scanning for any sign of the enemy. "Stay sharp," he murmured. "They'll be on us any second." As if on cue, a Zelthari patrol emerged from the shadows, their exoskeletons gleaming in the dim light. The team opened fire, their weapons barking in unison. Ghost's sniper rifle cracked, and one of the aliens crumpled to the ground. Valkyrie lobbed a grenade, the explosion sending shards of debris flying. The twins moved in tandem, their combat knives flashing as they closed the distance with the aliens. But the Zelthari were relentless. One of them lunged at Kane, its clawed hand slicing through the air. Kane dodged to the side, his rifle barking as he fired a burst of rounds into the alien's chest. It staggered but didn't fall, its movements unnervingly fluid. "They're not going down," Rook shouted, his voice tinged with panic. "Aim for the joints." Dr. Reyes called out, her voice cutting through the chaos. Their exoskeletons are weakest there. Kane adjusted his aim, firing at the alien's knees. It stumbled, its movements faltering, and Kane seized the opportunity. He lunged forward, driving the butt of his rifle into the alien's helmet. The creature crumpled to the ground, its body twitching. The battle was over as quickly as it had begun, the corridor falling silent once more. Kane took a deep breath, his chest heaving as he surveyed the scene. The team was battered but alive, their determination unshaken. "We need to keep moving," Kane said, his voice firm. "They'll send more patrols." The team gathered their gear and pressed forward, their footsteps echoing in the alien structure. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The walls seemed to close in around them, the air growing heavier with each step. Kane's mind raced as they moved, the weight of their mission pressing heavily on his shoulders. "Kane," Rook said, his voice low, "I'm picking up some kind of signal. It's coming from up ahead." Kane nodded, his grip tightening on his rifle. "Let's check it out." They moved cautiously, their senses on high alert. The corridor opened into a large chamber, its walls lined with alien consoles and glowing screens. In the center of the room stood a massive, pulsating orb, its surface shifting and swirling like liquid metal. The air around it crackled with energy, and Kane could feel the hum of power vibrating through the ground. "What the hell is that?" Valkyrie muttered, her eyes wide. "It's their core," Dr. Reyes said, her voice filled with awe. "The heart of their operations. If we can destroy it, we can cripple their entire network." Kane's eyes narrowed as he studied the orb. "How do we take it out?" Dr. Reyes hesitated, her brow furrowed in thought. "We'll need to overload it, but it won't be easy. The energy output is immense. We'll need to plant charges at specific points to destabilize it." Kane nodded, his mind racing. "All right, Valkyrie, you're on it. Rook, help her. Ghost, cover them. Twins, watch our backs. Doc, stay with me." "They're not going down," Rook shouted, his voice tinged with panic. "Aim for the joints," Dr. Reyes called out, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Their exoskeletons are weakest there." Kane adjusted his aim, firing at the alien's knees. It stumbled, its movements faltering, and Kane seized the opportunity. He lunged forward, driving the butt of his rifle into the alien's helmet. The creature crumpled to the ground, its body twitching. "They're not going down," Rook shouted, his voice tinged with panic. "Aim for the joints," Dr. Reyes called out, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Their exoskeletons are weakest there." Kane adjusted his aim, firing at the alien's knees. It stumbled, its movements faltering, and Kane seized the opportunity. Kane took a deep breath, his resolve hardening. "All right," he said. "We'll do it. But we need to move fast." The team gathered around Daniels, helping him to his feet. He leaned heavily on Rook, his face pale but determined. "This way," he said, gesturing to a narrow passageway. "It's a shortcut." They moved through the passageway, their footsteps echoing in the confined space. The air grew colder, the walls closing in around them. Kane's mind raced as they walked, the weight of their mission pressing heavily on his shoulders. They were walking into the heart of the enemy's stronghold, and the odds were stacked against them. But they had no other choice. As they emerged from the passageway, the financial district stretched out before them, its once proud skyscrapers now looming like tombstones. The Zelthari Command Center was a massive structure, its alien architecture stark against the ruined cityscape. Kane's heart pounded in his chest as he surveyed. But before they could take more than a few steps, a low, guttural growl echoed through the air. Kane spun around, his rifle raised, just as a Zelthari patrol emerged from the shadows. Their exoskeletons gleamed in the dim light, their weapons humming.